I see ya.
Hey.
Hey. Okay, so I'm gonna do the, I'm gonna get ready to share the screen, right? Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, you can just let it sit on the first slide.
We'll go. Just, where'd it go? It's not one of my choices. I just clicked on it down at the bottom. It was saved.
Yeah, just make sure your PowerPoint is, the program is open on your computer, and then you should be able to do it.
Yeah, it is.
There it is.
That's weird.
It wouldn't be Zoom without a hiccup.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Thank you. And then we're going to go to 1, play from start. Hello.
There you go.
Is your camera on?
Okay. Is my camera on? Can you see me?
Nope.
There we are. Okay. I believe we're clear.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay.
So my plan, I think, has changed just a little bit. What I want to do is, if everything is good to go, I'm assuming it is, if you can control your PowerPoint, that will open up for attendees to start entering the room about 5 minutes till.
Okay.
And then we'll get the program started probably a couple minutes afterwards.
All right. Well, we'll be able to chat with people as they come in, or?
Yeah, you can chat with them. I take that back. They can't chat back. So you can talk to them, but they can't talk back to you.
Well, I don't think I'll start talking to them until it's time to start talking to them then.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a safety precaution. Webinars get a little hairy when everyone else can talk.
Yeah, I imagine.
Someone always forgets to turn off the TV.
It's just so weird talking to people this way when you can't really see them or, interact with them or read their faces, It's just crazy.
Yeah, you're not going to get any feedback in terms of, visual, audience, sounds, anything. It's kind of weird.
I know, I don't like it. Too bad though, huh? No, I really appreciate you doing this for me.
That's what we're in now for at least a while, right?
Oh, God, yeah. But this is really a gift. I've been going to other bookstores, I've been hitting Laguna and they are like, nope, not taking any new books. Nope, not doing any virtual book signings.
Really?
Do you live in town? I might think about carrying your book if you lived here, but if you don't, go away.
No, we're excited for it. Hopefully we have a good turnout on Saturday. And I think with the upcoming holiday season, this is going to be a front runner for us. It's going to be great.
I'm hoping so, yeah. This will be good. This is fun for me. So
let's see who joined us.
Okay.
Is this Dottie?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and leave your camera off.
Hi, Dottie.
We'll go ahead. So Dottie, just so you know, we're going to go ahead and start letting people in about 5 minutes till.
Okay.
So we're going to kind of go radio silence at that point until I do an introduction about 5:02 or whenever we have. I mean, if 100 people join the room earlier, we'll get started earlier.
Okay.
Someone else joining.
Oh, we don't want to leave anybody out. We can't start before 5 o'clock.
So, okay. Who else just joined the room as Jared?
Well, one of them's me, Steve.
Okay.
Hi, Steve.
Is that how I'm showing up as Jared again?
Yeah, well, yeah, Dottie, if you sign into the director email, it will every time.
I said, what? Say that again?
If you signed into Zoom with the director email, like I do, and I think Steve did,
yes.
It shows up as my name.
I only did that once, though. That's the thing, but it still keeps showing me as you.
Oh, well, we'll make it work. Just keep your cameras off. Put yourself on mute when we open this up.
Okay.
Oh, I take that back. Someone hit the button. So we are no longer in practice. We are live. So if everyone would hit their mute.
What does that mean for us?
That just means everything we're saying now is being watched by attendees. The attendees are
Okay.
starting to join the room.
I'll behave myself.
Okay. So
I'm gonna go get myself something to drink. I'll be right back.
yeah, go for it. Hey, Steve, would you put yourself on mute?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm back and ready. I'm getting my book here. Ah, what a funny line. In a minute. It's lighting. I should be reading the one that I have marked down over here. That's the one I should be reading. That's the one with my notes in it. Hey, Jared, are you still there? Jared. Okay. What is
I don't know where he went, Barbara.
it?
I'm here.
Didn't give
Oh,
any
okay.
excuse. There, you're there. Hey, I want to know if I want to go away from the PowerPoint just to me talking. Do I have that power?
You do. All you need to do is stop sharing your screen and you'll be the primary speaker.
So I will go stop. Let me just try that for a minute.
But remember, you'll have to reshare it again if you do that.
Uh-oh. And then I go back to share screen. Okay, and I go back to there. I probably won't do that. That takes too long. Okay, never mind. Wasn't there some old TV personality that used to be sitting there reading a book when you came onto him, and then he would put the book down and say, "Oh, thank you for coming."
Didn't
It
Mr.
probably was.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Except for the lighting. I could actually be reading this book, but it's
My
so
wife
dark
reminds
over
me
here.
it's Masterpiece Theater, including with the library.
It's just what I was thinking of was Masterpiece Theater.
There we go.
Alistair Cook.
Well, you never know when somebody's going to try to pick up the movie version of Sweet Alice, so perhaps we'll be seeing it there. How's Katie doing, Steve?
Well, it's as good to be as could be expected. I mean, she's not doing too much. So
Has her end of the publishing industry closed down, or was she freelancing?
She had just a temp job for about 4 months. That was last October through January. So it was to get through the holiday season. But yeah, I think everything's kind of slowed down.
So is she writing a book?
Not to my knowledge. I know she's looking for a job, but there's always so much of that that's going around too right now.
She ever think of going to work at some of these new warehouses out by the Air Force Base?
I don't really think so. I know she is considering grad school, so she may do that.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah, well, that'd probably be good for a career.
you could do English pretty well in a Zoom setting, because it's just you're assigning reading and writing, and then you could have online discussions. So I would think that would work out pretty well.
Yeah.
So,
The question is, you want to spend that kind of money for Zoom classes?
well, now that's true too. So here I am.
And why would you? You could get it all free.
Well, there you go.
Writing classes, independent people.
Except that you don't get the degree, then probably.
Right. Yeah. And there is
No one's going to give you that sheepskin.
After this, there may not be the prestige in a sheepskin that there used to be.
That may very well be right. Yes.
Hey, let's go ahead and go ahead and let me get started.
Okay.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Jared Hoagland, Director of the Mission Inn Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to another one of our online talks. Tonight's talk is part of an ongoing program called Humanities Hour, a collaboration between the Mission Inn Foundation, Riverside Public Library, Inlandia Institute, and Riverside Art Museum. Funding has been provided by the California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the CARES Act Economic Stabilization Plan of 2020. Now, I'd like to introduce Barbara Burns, author and Mission Inn Foundation docent, to speak about her newly published book, Sweet Alice, Riverside, Tahoe, and Laguna. Thank you, Barbara, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Jared. It's my pleasure to be here. I've got a new take on Riverside history. The subject is, my working title for this book was The Lady Who Ran the Mission Inn. And I thought that would be fairly shocking for those of you who are from Riverside and know the history of the Mission Inn, because we are so Frank Miller centric. But in the course of, well, let me see. I'll start out with a couple of things. I was a docent for 20 years. I'm still a docent. What am I talking about? I've been docenting for 22 years. Then I did docent training for almost 10 years. So I've taken the docent training class 11 times, and I know Steve's lectures and Walter's lectures and Jerry Gordon's lectures upside down and sideways. And I always wondered, after all these years of taking these classes, where were the stories about the women in the Mission Inn? And could Frank Miller have really done all the things that we give him credit for without some kind of a strong woman by his side? So I decided I was going to do some research. And here we go. One of the first things, this is where am I? Give me a second. If you know me, I'm technologically challenged here. There we go. This, of course, if you're not in Riverside and you haven't had a chance to go to the Mission Inn lately, this is the location of most of what happens in Sweet Alice. But this article, when I went into the archives of the Riverside Public Library, and I went to the California Digital Newspaper Collection, I found this one, and it mentions the Sierra sailing for a Hawaiian port. This is a big cruise ship, and it says among the passengers were many prominent residents of the island and a large number of tourists. Among the passengers was Mrs. Alice Richardson of Lake Tahoe and Riverside. She is one of the best known and most successful businesswomen in California. I'm like, I've been giving tours of the Mission Inn for 20 years, and I don't tell one story about the most important or successful businesswoman in California who lived at the hotel. So this kind of gave me a carte blanche to go ahead and see if there wasn't a story about Alice to be told. And I went to Maurice Hodgin, who had written the book about Frank and did all the research. And he had 12 boxes of 3x5 cards about Alice. So he let me go look through those. And I went to Joan Hall, who wrote the books about the people who had gone through the doors of the Mission Inn. And she had a really good chapter too on Alice Miller Richardson. And I went to Steve Leck because he had such a wonderful postcard collection. There are very few pictures of people and times during this era. So I looked at all of those kinds of things. And I thought about what I knew about Alice from history. And what I knew about her was that she was, let's see. Well, this is the lady we're talking about, and this is Hafsep Pushman's picture of her, painted in 1918. And when I first saw this one, I said, whoever painted this was in love with Alice. And perhaps that was the case. And here's another one of my favorite pictures of Alice. This is her playing the kazoo to entertain young Frank Miller Hutchings, Frank's grandson. And you could see she would do just about anything if it would make Frank and his little grandson laugh. And this is one of my favorites of Alice. This is the way I picture her greeting the guests at the hotel. This is a very young Alice. This is one of the second youngest picture I have of her. And I'm just not quite sure how old she is, but if you know the hotel, you might recognize this picture because it's still on display. Not very well lighted, but it is on display. And this is the earliest picture I have of Frank and Alice and elder sister Emma. This was taken in Toma, Wisconsin, the year that Lincoln was assassinated. And I think Frank is about 7 here, Alice about 5. She was only 2 years younger than he, and Emma maybe 12. She's 5 years older than young Frank. And Frank and she had a really tight relationship, partly because they were born very close, but they had complementary personalities. And I found this letter also in the archives of the library, and it also told me a lot about the relationship that the brother and sister had. I've had a lot of people ask me if he wasn't mean to her, or if he didn't just, there's all kinds of crazy stories about the two of them. But Alice was on a trip to Cuba, and Alice was a big prohibitionist, wasn't much, and here she was off on a country that made its money off of rum. And apparently Frank didn't tell her she shouldn't go, and he didn't say anything to her beforehand. But well, halfway through the trip, he writes this letter to Mr. Moses Sherman, who is the guide guiding the tour. And he said, Frank writes, I hope that everything is going well with the merry party that you are escorting over a good portion of the world. I beg of you that when you arrive in Havana, you will keep them in close mesh. People from prohibition countries are liable, and my sister especially. Please, please watch her. Most sincerely, Frank Augustus Miller. Now, they're in their 60s by now, and he's still writing letters looking out for her, making sure that she doesn't get arrested, or worse yet, when she goes to Cuba. I thought that was sweet. And it shows what a fine and loving relationship the two of them had. This one is, this is probably, let's see, little kid on the left over here. Can you see that arrow? That's Stanley, their child. This is Frank Watson Richardson, the husband. And here is Alice. Frank is next to her there. Alice is in white, and she's looking pretty happy. These are that's Stanley, her son. And these are the Newman twins, Emma's little boys. And here's Isabella, and there's Frank, and there's Mama Marion Clark, or Marion Miller. Mary Ann Miller. So yes, Alice had a life and a family. She had this husband named Frank Watson Richardson, who came to work for her in 1880 and married her in 1885. And there's their son Stanley again, who was kind of a scamp and a effervescent personality, he was said to have. And Frank seemed to be a pretty good guy, Mr. Richardson. He doted on Alice and did what she asked him. This is a little sweet picture of family life of the Richardsons. There's Frank sitting by the roll top desk. Alice is reading aloud to him, I believe. And Stanley and a friend of his are playing cards over on an Indian blanket on what appears to be a daybed. If anybody can figure out what room this is in, I would love to know. I cannot, for the life of me, figure where they lived before the 1903 section of the hotel was built. But this is just a little snapshot of family life, and everything seems lovely. This is a very handsome picture of Stanley when he grew up. This is him at about 31 years of age, going off to World War I. And he really is a nice looking young man. And again, we have Frank and Alice having fun at home. Frank Watson Richardson was a tenor and very famous for his singing voice, was invited around town to sing at weddings and parties and things like that. And there's Alice playing the piano. She was a really good musician as well. And here's where the mystery starts to come in. You have Frank, let's see. Alice had been running the hotel for 6 years before Frank bought it. She ran it for, let's see, almost 30 years before her husband died. And yet, whenever there's an occasion where Frank Watson Richardson and Alice Richardson are together managing a hotel, it usually just says Mr. Richardson is the manager. And I thought, okay, isn't that interesting? Let's go find out what kind of a manager he was. And as it turns out, he wasn't the manager at all. This is a sham, and this is the beginning of the sham. The business cards, the brochures that say that Frank Watson Richardson was the manager are being polite. Perhaps they're being politically correct, but it was Alice who was the manager at the hotels that they ran in Los Angeles, at the hotel they ran in Riverside, at the hotel they ran in Lake Tahoe, even though the papers and the brochures give credit to Frank W. They said that when Frank W. died, which was in 1906, that Alice was destitute, and Frank Miller gave her the job of managing the hotel because she had nothing else to do. Well, that certainly wasn't true. Alice lived in a place like this all her life, not a place for a poor person. She managed the Tahoe Tavern for 6 years, and it's a beautiful, luxurious, grand destination hotel, unlike anything was ever in Tahoe before, and unlike probably anything that's in Tahoe now. Actually, it was a fabulous place, and she spent quite a bit of time there, and she ran the place. And then this is her humble little cottage down in Laguna Beach. So she was able to live in the Mission Inn, at the Tahoe Tavern, and have this lovely piece of property at Laguna Beach. This is the painting by William Wendt that hangs in the lobby of the Mission Inn. And from the Coast Highway side, which is where Mr. Wendt painted it from, his backyard was just a little bit up the hill, and he liked to paint the view from his backyard. It looks like humble artist shacks, which is what we have always thought it to be. But in 1911, these houses, this is from the little bit up the coast from them, were painted by a guy named F. Melville Dumond. And this painting is in the UC Irvine Museum, the California Art Institute. And the little green roofed house is Alice's. Well, she bought them both. And the one on the left she gave to Rose Hardenberg, Isabella's sister, as her vacation home. And if you'll see, there's a lovely long staircase of about 1,000 steps that takes you down to the beach in front. And this is the view today of that property. I'm going to show you, if you look right in the middle, this is a photograph. That little, where the arrow is, if you can see that, that's where the Villa Rockledge is now. That address is 2529 South Coast Highway. And right over here is where Alice's two little houses were built. And in 1904, she went down to the real estate guy in Laguna Beach and bought these two plots right there next to where the Villa Rockledge is, and 40 acres to the south. This whole bluff was all of Alice's. And this is where some pretty substantial McMansions are right now. This is Victoria Beach down here. This is where the Pirates Tower is. And way down here is where the Roberts live currently. So Alice did pretty well by herself. She was not poor, and that part of the story is not true at all. This is their son, Stanley, grown up. He played football at Poly and went on to play football at UC Berkeley. But this is about the time Stanley was graduating from high school, was the day that Theodore Roosevelt came and planted the tree in front. And if you look very carefully, this little scamp back here with the part down the middle of his hair. He made sure he was in the picture when President Roosevelt was there planting the tree. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the book. I'm not going to read it from, well, maybe I will read it from the book. I thought this would be especially fun. I'm so excited that the books have arrived. And I was looking forward to be able to read parts of it from you. So here we go. President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, was a guest for the first year that the 200-room Grand Destination Hotel opened. He was there May 7th and 8th, 1903. There were preparations being made all over the hotel for the arrival of such an important guest. Alice's son, Stanley, prepared by making sure he was close to the president when the official photo was being taken. At the same time, Stanley's mother was on her way to the kitchen of the inn to speak to Chef Zhuang, who was Chinese, about the menu. Alice was dressed in a rather plain suit. When she arrived in the kitchen, she saw that Zhuang was dressed in his finest Chinese silks. She also noticed that Chef Zhuang looked at her with disapproval. Chef Zhuang felt the arrival of the president was an event that should be honored by wearing fine clothes. And Chef Zhuang said, "Mrs. Richardson, you're not dressed very well. You're Mr. Miller's sister." Alice thought for a moment about how reliable Zhuang was and what a great help he was to her brother and how fond her brother was of him. And she said, "Very well, Zhuang, if you do not like this dress, I will put on another." Later that same day, Alice, in a much finer dress, made sure that Zhuang, in his finest Chinese silks, was introduced to the president. That evening, when Zhuang told Alice how honored he was to be introduced to the president, he also told her how disappointed he was at the president's commonplace attire. The story goes thereafter that if any question of suitability of dress arose for a member of the Miller family, the response would be, "Go consult Zhuang on that." It was Mrs. Richardson's door that Zhuang would knock on in the middle of the night when there was a rumor that Chinese workers were being rounded up for deportation. She would load the Chinese workers into one of the big touring cars and drive them out of town to a friend's ranch where they would be safe. Author Zona Gale, Frank Miller's friend, Alice's friend and Frank Miller's autobiographer, described Alice Miller Richardson as being distinct and kind, whether she was receiving a royal guest or putting on another dress to please a Chinese cook. Okay, so there we go. So I was going to focus back on the cover. Let me do that for a second. Sorry, hope this doesn't make you seasick. Ah, wow. Can you see this part? I probably did this wrong. The portrait on the top of the book, this part, this is Alice, the Pushman portrait. This is the hotel, the way it looked in 1903. This one down here is the Tahoe Tavern, where Alice went to start managing in 1904. And this, of course, is the coast where she lived in Laguna Beach. So part one of the book takes place mainly at the Mission Inn. And then Alice gets an offer to go do a job for a guy who has built a big, beautiful hotel in Lake Tahoe. And this guy has built the first opulent tourist hotel for people to come to in Lake Tahoe, and it's only open in the summer. And the guy's name is Bliss, and he's so great that they named a park after him up there. So he builds this big, beautiful hotel, which you can barely see on the edge over there. He had to build a train. He had to run a train into, this is on North Lake Tahoe, into where he put the hotel. And then he built a narrow gauge train and a steamship and a pier out into the lake. So he had this big ship that came in and would pull up at the pier, and then you'd get off the steamship and walk across the pier and get on the narrow gauge train, and the train would take you right into the lobby of the hotel. It was that luxurious. And there's the beautiful steamship. It was supposed to be unsinkable. It carried 200 people at a time. So 200 people at a time got off the boat and went into the Tahoe Tavern, and it could accommodate 450 people sleeping. This was one of the main things to eat when you go to Lake Tahoe. They are famous for their Lake Tahoe trout. And this guy was so big, you could put an apple in his mouth. And one of the first things Alice did when she went to Lake Tahoe was hire chefs and fishermen full time so that trout would be able to be served at every meal. And it was a big hit. This is Alice and Frank Miller Richardson and a friend relaxing in front of the Tahoe Tavern, one of the very few photos we have. And actually, I think it was taken by young Alice, Frank's daughter, with her brand new Eastman camera. And she took a lot of pictures of them when they took their trips to Yellowstone and Yosemite in the summer times. And I believe this is from her camera. So the reason Alice was running the Tahoe Tavern is because she was so good at running the Mission Inn. She became famous and people were offering her jobs all the time. And she wanted to get out of Riverside in the summertime because there wasn't much work there for her. Nobody came to stay at the Mission Inn during, like July through August. So they didn't have much to do. She hired herself out at other hotels, and the guy who ran the Tahoe Tavern had lost $23,000 the first year that he was open. And he was only open for 3 months. And he was desperate to find someone who had a reputation like Alice had for running the Mission Inn, being very hospitable, making it home-like, making it not feel like a hotel, but more like a country home. So he wrote to her and she accepted the offer. And for the summers 1904 through 1909, she ran the Tahoe Tavern, and the very first year that she ran it, the place profited $23,000. And after that, it was just booming, busy with people. The people that she hosted in at the Mission Inn would come up and visit her at Lake Tahoe in the summer. She used to throw these fabulous parties at Lake Tahoe. This is one of their equestrian picnics, I believe. There's Alice looking away from the camera there with the hat on. This is D.L. Bliss, the guy who owned the Tahoe Tavern. And there's a bunch of all their friends and people having a lovely time. A couple of Isabella Hardenberg sisters are sitting there behind her in the crazy hats. And here we have, this is interesting, even though Alice went off in the summertime to a different place, the whole family of Millers came and visited her while she was in Lake Tahoe. And they even brought along Uncle Albert. And one of the rumors about Alice is that she was short and fat. That's why there's a really short, wide door on her apartment up on the 4th floor. Not true, it's an artistic door and she fancied it. As you can see, she was about as tall as Frank and, of slender build. And here she was. This is a year after her husband died. He died in 1906. The elevation wasn't good for him. So anyway, here's a picture of them having a nice old time. And there she is, Mrs. Alice Richardson, manager. Before her husband died, no one acknowledged that Alice was the moving force, the driving energy that put the Tahoe Tavern on the map. And it became one of the most famous hotels in the country while she was running it. And then you want to know if there's any romance in the book. Well, there is. This is Alice's romantic interest. Number one, this is the most ardent of her admirers. His name is Harold Bell Wright, and he has a museum in the Ozarks still to this day. It's in Branson, Missouri. And he was the most prolific, most successful novelist of their time. He sold more than 1 million copies of Shepherd of the Hills, which is was made into a movie, and John Wayne starred in it. And it still plays to this day in Branson as a play. So he was about to get divorced when he moved into the Mission Inn, and he stayed for 3 years. And I swear the reason he came was to pursue Alice. And you will read more about that when you read the book. And this, of course, is another romantic interest. This is the beautiful portrait that Hofsep Pushman painted of her. Pushman had given up painting. And as you can see, he was a very gifted artist. And she talked him into going back into painting, and he painted this beautiful portrait of her. And they had this, he was also at the Mission Inn for 3 years with a studio. And about the same time that Harold Bell Wright was, she was, as they say, it was natural for men to fall in love with her. This is another portrait that Pushman painted of, I believe it's his wife, but we're not sure. Yikes. This is the Villa Rockledge, which is the house that Frank Miller built just north of Alice's house, down in Laguna Beach. Alice was there first. Alice was the first one to meet Arthur Benton. Alice was the first one to go to Laguna Beach. Alice bought the property that Frank Miller's house sat on because she knew it would be an ideal place for him to build his little house. And if you'll notice, there's a pool down there that's filled in by the tide. The Dosons have been here on a number of occasions, and it's just a really wonderful, exciting place. And there are new owners there right now, and we're going to try to make some inroads with them and see if maybe they won't invite us to come back down and take a tour of the house again someday. So I was going to read another little bit from the excerpt of the book. This is a little bit it'll tell you about why Frank Miller thought about buying a hotel in the first place. Because when he first came to Riverside, he helped build the buildings for the hotel, but he was not the least bit interested in running the hotel, which is how it came to Alice to be running the hotel for 5 years, 6 years before he ever bought it. So here we go. For the first time, Frank thought about taking $5,000 and buying the Glenwood from his father. It was not a business in which he was particularly interested, not like he knew his sister was. His sister had already proven herself able to manage a hotel quite brilliantly without any help from him. He began to think with himself as proprietor and his sister as manager, they could be very successful. If she handled the day-to-day management of the hotel, Frank would be free to pursue some of the things that he was passionate about. He had many fine ideas for improving Riverside in California. His plans included making Riverside its own county, building good roads, a hospital, good schools, parks, a municipal auditorium, railroads, churches, libraries, golf course, and of course, world peace. The hotel could be his headquarters. So my thought is that Frank was not a hotel guy at all. He was a civic guy and he was a Riverside guy. And he bought the hotel partly because it was a good business entity, but it was his sister Alice who had made it a good business entity. So a critical part of the piece of Frank's plan to buy the Glenwood was that Alice come back from college to manage it. She went off to college, the first time she ever left Riverside since coming there as a 14-year-old. When they decided to sell the Glenwood and she didn't have a job anymore, the parents shipped her off to college. So Frank thought if Alice would come back and manage it, then it would be okay. If he could count on her to manage the hotel, he knew the business would continue to thrive. It was obvious to Frank and everyone who ever saw her at work that she had a talent for the job. He discussed his plans with her, as he always did, and he had barely gotten the words out of his mouth when she said a resounding yes. So what a life changer this was for Alice. Alice is up at college. She's just lost the best job she's ever had in her life. She's wondering what's going to happen to her. And her brother Frank turns around and says, no, I'm going to buy the hotel and I'm going to give you back your job. What a life changer this was for Alice. Her brother had given back to her what her father had taken away. Her brother knew how important that job was to her. Her brother knew when he was only 23, and he had such faith in her ability that he took his life savings and bought a hotel because he had no doubt that she would make it profitable. She, at only 21, had the confidence to let him. Kind of tells you a little bit about their relationship. Here's another good little story about the relationship. Alice and her brother counted on each other, personally and professionally. When Alice found she was short-handed on a day when demands on the hotel services were especially heavy, she had no problem asking her brother to drop what he was doing and fill in as a waiter or a carriage driver. And when Frank had an obligation in Riverside that conflicted with the meeting he had with the governor in California, in Sacramento, he didn't hesitate to ask Alice to go to Sacramento and see the governor in his place. They were that tight. And I would say that this little quotation here, I'm going to read you one more right now from Elbert Hubbard. Right, not L. Ron Hubbard, Elbert Hubbard of the Roycroft community in New York State. I was a little bit hesitant about writing this story about Alice because I thought it would fly in the face of Steve Leck's theories about Frank being the hotel owner or Walters or Jerry Gordon's or all those guys who had told the stories of the Mission Inn before. I was worried that this was going to require them to change some of their stories. And I was a little bit trepidatious about it until I read this little bit from Albert Hubbard. He writes about the Mission Inn, that the place is a monument to the good taste and restless brain of Frank Miller, but the actual working manager is Alice Richardson, sister of the master of the inn. Brother and sister work together, each with special gifts in the way of ability. Mrs. Richardson is smiling, low-voiced, gentle, friendly, appreciative, seeing everything and nothing. No guest is overlooked, yet none is loaded with attention. You have everything you want, and the things you do not want are not forced upon you. Alice Richardson is a sort of superwoman. Nothing seems to annoy her. She has no troubles, and although she must carry great responsibilities, she carries them well balanced. That's our Alice. Let me show you a few more lovely pictures. All these pictures that I'm showing you, you will see in the book. And I got to tell you, the only person that's read the book besides me, whoops, we'll go back here, says that it's, what did he tell me it was? Interesting, engaging, and well written. So I would like to encourage you to get your copy now. Apparently there's a shortage at the distributors, and I ordered a copy from Amazon thinking I would be able to get it right away on the first day. And my Amazon copy is not coming in until December right now. So the only entity that I know of that has copies of this delightful book is the Mission Inn Museum. And they ordered 150 copies. I'm signing them furiously as fast as I can. We're doing a book signing distribution on Saturday, and I'll be there on the mall behind a plexiglass under an easy up by the door of the museum. And we'll be passing out lots and lots of these, but there's only 150 that I know of right now. So if you bought yours on Amazon and you're impatient to get it, I'd go down to the Mission Inn and buy one from them. You might want to just give the one that comes in on Amazon about Christmas time as a Christmas gift. So with that said, we'll look at some more pictures here. Hang on a sec. Villa Rockledge, beautiful, gorgeous place. Roger Jones, who lived in the Villa Rockledge for quite a few years before it was recently sold, was a big source of information about Alice. He didn't realize it, but he had all kinds of good stuff stashed away in his book, talking about Alice and dates and times for when she got that property. I had to go to great lengths to find things, not only in the archives in the basement of the Riverside Public Library. I went to public records. I went to the LA County property records. I went to Orange County property records, San Bernardino County property records, just checking to see if they owned any property anywhere. This check was very interesting, made out to Herbert Hoover. Alice signed the checks, Frank co-signed the checks. This particular one was sent to Herbert Hoover because he was in charge of the Belgian Relief Fund after World War I. And Alice's Stanley had gone off to fight the war in Europe during World War I. So they were doing all kinds of things that they could to help the war effort. So this is just an example of their contributions to the Belgian Relief Fund. This is a lovely old picture of there's Alice. It's not one of my favorite pictures of her, standing next to Charles Fletcher Lummis on the other side of that post there. And this is an old picture of the lobby, the way it used to look in 1903 era. Lots of beautiful Indian rugs on the floor and hangings on the wall, sayings that you can still find in the museum. You can be both grand and comfortable up there on the tippy top. This is a whole interesting other story about DeWitt Hutchings and the painting, the Murillo. And here it hangs in the Jonathan Club in Los Angeles. And there's a whole great story. If I write another book, I think it will be about DeWitt because he is such an interesting character. Alice was famous for treating her employees as if they were dear friends of the family. And when it was time to find a place for her employees to live because there just wasn't space in the hotel or locally in town, they built this lovely little annex out back. And it was a mini Mission Inn used by the same architect lots of the same features, beautiful balconies, lots of arches, lots of tile work. The tile work that's still in there is completely breathtaking. And what's the tragic about it is that it's built into the walls, and the walls are so shaky that they're afraid if they were trying to restore and preserve the tile, that the building would just crumble around them. But when this was new, it was fabulous. It was the women's dormitory. There was music rooms, there was paintings as nice as the ones in the hotel. There was a wonderful kitchen and dining room for the staff. It was a really wonderful place to work, and people like bellboys spent 15 years in service. This is the event where Princess Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden is here, and Alice is hosting the event. She's under the little red circle there. I hope you can see that. But where did Alice learn to make banquets like this? She started out as a 14-year-old running a boarding house. And she became known as a world famous hostess. This is an interesting little tidbit. This is Alice with the lady who ran the Fugla Hotel in Japan. And when they went on a trip, they visited her. She speaks 11 languages and had never been out of Japan in her whole life. She learned her languages at a convent. But her first trip that she came out of Japan, they came and visited here at the Mission Inn. And here she and Alice are having a nice little reading in her room. When Stanley retired from the military, and he lived in Hawaii most of his life with his family, except for a few years when he was stationed at the Presidio and another few years when he was at Fort Sam Houston. Here he is just after retirement, looking very somber. And there's Alice, pleased as punch that Stanley and his lovely wife, Roberta, have moved back to Riverside, and they live in a nice little house over on Bandini Street. And she can see them all the time. This is a fun story. The lady on the left is May Robeson, and she was Alice's best friend, one of her best friends throughout her life. And May Robeson played with Cary Grant on the left and Katharine Hepburn on the right in that great screwball comedy known as Bringing Up Baby. And it was at May Robeson's recommendation that Cary Grant came and spent a month in room 220 at the Mission Inn in 1932 while he was making a movie called, I believe it's called Hot Sunday. And Randolph Scott was in it. And Cary Grant actually came back 20, 30 years later to see if he could find his old room and see how the hotel had fared. And it was unfortunately in pretty bad shape by the time he came, but he took a nice tour with the docent. Oh, and yes, when a lot of people did not know that Alice was Frank Miller's sister. So even though she had run the hotel for his whole life, her whole life, when he died, she sent out these wonderful little cards saying gratefully acknowledging and thanking you for your kind expression of sympathy from Frank A. Miller's sister, Alice, because some people thought she was just Mrs. Richardson, the manager of the hotel, and not any relationship to Frank. That's interesting too, isn't it? Yikes. Sorry, gotta go back a minute. I did not mean to do that. There we are. Okay. These are the kind of Christmas cards that Alice would send in her declining years, sitting in front of this fireplace, which I hope looks very familiar to those of you who know the Mission Inn well, because it's still right there, this lovely little round fireplace near the entrance to the music room, old music room, current Grand Parisian Ballroom. Yes. And she would use a poem by Edwin Markham. And Edwin Markham was a favorite author here at the hotel. And there's a lovely, lovely stained glass window in the Spanish Art Gallery dedicated to him. And she used his words on her Christmas card. And that was very sentimental of her. And this is a picture you might recognize. This is probably the most publicized picture of Alice, and I never thought much of it, and it's not my favorite of her, but it is the one that was in the newspaper when she died in 1938. And as it says, she was the beloved manager of the Mission Inn. And even though the newspapers don't say that about her, and there isn't that much evidence from the Miller family that she was the beloved, there certainly is in the archives and the letters and the newspapers. This is the newspapers were positively glowing about her. This is 2 years after she dies. Jessie Van Brunt has been living at the Mission Inn, and she's the stained glass artist who is a philanthropist. She has a lot of money, and she makes it her joy in life to go around donating her windows to buildings. And she had come to the Mission Inn, and she'd already done a memorial for Frank Miller, the beautiful one that's in the atrio where he's standing with his arms up in the air ministering to the birds. And then she did this one of Alice, and it says up on the tippy top, it says Saint Martha, the patron saint of hospitality. And that was Alice for you. She was considered the world's greatest hostess. For 5 days before they installed this beautiful stained glass in the wall, it's on 6th Street of the Spanish Art Gallery. It's about halfway up the stairs before you get to the second landing. There were articles in the LA Times, the Riverside Press Enterprise, and the Herald Examiner saying that big goings on were happening at the Mission Inn that week. They were installing a window to honor the world's greatest hostess. And at that point, now that Alice is gone and Frank is gone, we can admit that Alice had a lot to do with running the hotel, with guiding it into being a place where people felt like they were staying in a country home. I just never thought that Frank had that in him. I mean, he was a civic guy. He was a planner. He was a worrier. And Alice was the motherly type who would take her guests on 30-mile tours around Riverside on the trolley and take them out to Box Springs and get them some fresh water from a spring where only she had permission to draw the water. And then she'd take them out to Magnolia Avenue, and they'd stop at the polo grounds and watch the guys playing polo. And then they'd go to the Sherman Institute and they'd watch the kids play football. And the Sherman Institute football players could beat the pants off the USC team and the Stanford teams. And Frank Miller got a great kick out of that. And then Alice would take the trolley on over to the foot of Mount Rubidoux, and there'd be a touring car meeting her guests there, and they could go up to the top of Mount Rubidoux for a bird's eye view. And that was what she did. She planned parties. She took people on tours. She introduced guests to each other. There were all these famous artists who had come to the Mission Inn because she had this little house down in Laguna, and Laguna was a big draw for plein air artists. And there weren't that many people in Laguna at the time. They all got to know each other. And she started offering to sell people's paintings at the Mission Inn, and the guests at the Mission Inn loved the idea of taking home a wonderful plein air portrait of a beautiful landscape they had seen in California. So this wonderful relationship between the artists of Laguna and the Mission Inn developed, and we have a lot of their paintings at the Mission Inn today. We sold most of them because they sell like hotcakes, and it put beauty on the walls of the very kind of gray, dull, monastery-like building. So it was a great relationship, and Alice spent all of her vacations down in Laguna from 1904 until 1938 when she died. And her son had a lovely little place there, and he inherited a fair amount of money, something probably comparable to what his cousin was inheriting the Mission Inn. Let's see, where do I go? Stop shares. Let me get up here for a sec. Something's wet. Hold on a second. Okay. I want to go there, right? Jared, give me a hand here. Thanks. Where was I? I was just finishing a thought, and I got all confused technically. Hey, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. It's fascinating. You do have questions in the queue if you can see the Q&A section.
Oh yeah, let me see if I can click on that. Thanks. Was that room for John Goolsby? Do I have to type his answer, or can I yell it?
You can yell it.
Okay, John Goolsby, it's room 401 is Alice's room. 403 is the Alhambra suite. Okay. And Jennifer, hi, local tour guide, sites invite, a new walking tour. Why were the Chinese Exclusion Act? It was same as now, you know, there were people discriminating against Japanese, Chinese, Irish, Russian, you name it. You know, it's just the way things were at the time. They were worried about them buying property, getting too big a foothold, having influence. Okay, are there any famous Oh, sure, there's plenty of famous recipes, Jennifer. Actually, the docents put out a cookbook last year, and I would say the recipes would be in the archives if you really want to dig that deep. But does somebody out there know if there is a book of Old Mission Inn recipes? I'm thinking that there is, but it's not on the top of my head. Chris Johnson, interesting question. Beyond the Mission Inn, can we see Alice's influence anywhere else in Riverside? I'm going to say no. They didn't buy, she and her husband did not buy property in Riverside. They didn't buy a citrus grove. They didn't build any houses. She was manager of the Mission Inn. That was her thing. And she took her vacations in Laguna Beach, like everybody else in Riverside did at the time. And actually the house that she lived in Laguna Beach burned down. The Tahoe Tavern burned down. So I kind of think that's maybe why there isn't much memory of Alice around anywhere. There's nothing tangible to put your hands on. And Frank Miller's got his hands all over the Mission Inn. Throughout my journey of writing this book, Chris asks, was I able to connect with any of her relatives? In roundabout ways, I thought that she had only 2 grandchildren, and thanks to someone who used to work at the Mission Inn and had met Alice's daughter-in-law, Roberta, I found out that there were 3 grandchildren and what had happened to them. I've been in touch a little tiny bit with Annie News, who is on the Facebook page with Riverside Past and Present, but she didn't have anything that she could share with me. She was born after Alice had died. And so no, the answer to that is no. Okay, let me see what it was. Stephanie says she's enjoying the book. Oh, that's very gratifying because I think I'm the only one who's read it so far, except for you. I know the hotel business started for the family of Frank and Alice's parents. Did Mary Ann Miller have a role in the hotel after Frank purchased the hotel? No, that's the funny part. Because so Alice takes the, it's 1874, 75, the hotel down the road burns down. They start taking in the guests who are Frank's father's co-workers. And everybody ran the hotel. I mean, Alice's mom took it over, and she and the daughters and the little boy were in charge of the hotel. And the men went off to do what I think they thought were more manly roles. And then the very first year, big sister Emma gets married to very successful surveyor Gus Newman and takes off and goes and lives in Los Angeles. And that leaves Alice and little Frank and mom to run the hotel. And the mother says she's too sick to run the hotel. So it's at that point that Alice, at 15 years old, the 3rd child in the family and a girl, is given responsibility to run the hotel. And after that, I think mom sat back and watched what happened. I don't think she had much of an active role with Alice as a 15-year-old running the hotel, and certainly not once Frank purchased the hotel. She was just a guest. But good question. Anybody
Anyone
else?
Give them a
Okay.
second, type it out.
All right.
Might
I'm
as well
glad
say-
you all came. I hope you'll come on Saturday to pick up your book if you've ordered one. If you haven't ordered one, feel free to go ahead and do so at the Mission Inn Museum. We want to give them the business.
Looks like you had one more pop up.
We did. Let's see. What part of Wisconsin? Is that where, did I miss that one? Oh, they're from Toma. Tomah, like short for tomahawk, the first 4 letters of tomahawk. Okay. And you're all welcome. Thanks for coming. Hope to
Thank
see
you, Barbara.
Saturday. Yes.
Yeah, everyone come on out on Saturday. Again, we're the only source for this book, except for Stephanie, who works there. So she got a sneak peek. So that's how she got it.
What hours will you be there doing the book signing?
Well, actually, the the run is having an event, and they're starting at 9:30. So I'm going to be there at 9:30, and I'm going to hang out as long as people want me to sign books or pass them out for them. So, you know, I'll stay until like 3:30. There you go.
Excellent.
See
Thank
you
you, everyone.
Saturday.
Thank you, Barbara.
And if you're lucky, wait a minute. If you're lucky, maybe Riverside Jeopardy champion, who happens to be my daughter, will show up. There
Well,
we
thank
go.
everyone for
See you next
joining us.
time. Thanks.
And we'll see you next time and hopefully see you this weekend.
All right.